I'm going to assume you weren't, and that's why you're on here. So if you were, then this will be a rerun for you. All right, so as HR professionals, you are leaders in your own right, and you are in the business of people and all of the complexities that go with that. And then when you add the fact that you're working with your clients and their teams, your business just gets exponentially complex. And you've got to make choices every day on what approach you're using, how you're attacking a problem. And you've got these like human beings, and they're all different and they're all unique. It's just not a one size fits all job. And I wish I could see if you were nodding. That's the downside of being virtual, but we are well, we're going to make the best of this. So the reality is that you, like me and like all of us, are human beings, and we get stressed, and we've got lots of things to do, and we're under pressures, and things that, if someone shows up in your office with or your virtual office or your Zoom room with an issue, there are days when don't we all just want to just say, okay, I just need to find the fastest way to get this done. And I want to check the box and get it over with. Even though we know that when we're dealing with people, the most productive approach in the long run is to take the time to help people work through situations. But we don't always have that time. And I will tell you, today we're going to talk about coaching as a tool, but it is one of those tools that yields great results, but it takes a little more time. And I can't make the process faster, but I'm hoping that there's some things we can talk about today that will make it a little easier for you, might give you some clarity on how to tackle some of these situations using coaching as a tool. So I actually, I was in the corporate world for 30 years before becoming a coach about 12 years ago, I guess. And I really did like the people development part of my job. But I will admit, I didn't put as much focus on it until later years, until I just had a disastrous professional experience. And I did have a quite fun corporate career. It started out doing financial stuff, which seems rather inconsistent with coaching now, but it wasn't. I did financial stuff, but I took on increasing leadership positions. I worked on Wall Street for a while, but my disastrous career experience came when I was chief financial officer of a subsidiary of Shell. And it was, I always say that was the best and worst role of my career. It was the best because after I got out of it and could look back on it, I had a chance, I realized how much I'd learned. But it was the worst because it just wasn't a job for me. I was assigned to this job by my boss and mentor who thought he knew me and thought he knew what my strengths were, but he didn't. He thought I'd be the best qualified for the job. But I wasn't. And my role was just in kind of accepting whatever he said. And I didn't see the red flags. I hadn't thought about whether or not this was a job I wanted to do. I just assumed it was the natural next step for me. But it was a dysfunctional part of the company. It was having business issues and systems issues. What it needed were things that I didn't like to do, I wasn't good at. And I can tell you that this subsidiary, the last thing they wanted was a chief financial officer coming in from the corporate company, telling them what to do and how to do it and putting in controls and transparency. So every day was overscheduled, overstressed. I was so overwhelmed that I just couldn't see my way out of the fog. I don't know if you've ever had an experience like that. You just keep running faster on the hamster wheel and getting nowhere. And I was just fighting to stay afloat, watching what was going on in front of me, trying to figure out who was stabbing me in the back. And I can tell you there was absolutely no coaching going on at that time. But, you know, there's a light at the end of every tunnel. And for me, it was a transformational moment. I was given a shock, and it was the day when two different people, both of whom knew me really, really well, said to me using the exact same words on the exact same day in two different times of day, Susan, you are not the same person you were 6 months ago. And one of them is my now husband of 20 years. And he said, and if you don't get the old you back, we're done. And that's when I knew that I needed to take a step back and see what was going on. What was going on with me personally, my health, my relationships, but also how and what I was doing in my leadership role, and the impact that was having on my team, and the impact other leaders were having on me, and the whole trickle-down effect of all of that. And it just was like okay, I get it. Leadership impacts everything. It impacts morale. It impacts productivity, creativity, motivation, everything. And with that, that's when I chose to pivot my career into things that were much more about people development, leadership, and change. So those are the kinds of jobs I took. I became much more focused on my role as a leader, about developing people in that role as a leader, and recognizing leadership as a leverage point. So I turned down anything that was technical in nature for the rest of my career and my corporate career. And then post-corporate world, I continued on this path of people development, becoming a certified and credentialed coach. So now my job as a coach is to take both my corporate experience and my coaching training to help people or people involved in the people development business to realize their potential using coaching. Now, over the years, I worked with some wonderful HR advisors, and I actually always viewed them as partners. They would coach me, they would advise me, they would scold me, they would set me on the right track, they'd prevent me from doing stupid things, thankfully, and they always gave me the support to make the decisions to run my business. But it was that partnership, that equal partnership, that I appreciated and they appreciated. And for those of you that can give me a hand raise or an acknowledgement, do you feel, raise your proverbial Zoom hand, or just chime in through audio if you feel like you are treated and viewed as an equal partner with your clients.
Hi, Susan.
Hey, Teresa.
I would say, so the last corporate position I had was in August. I transitioned to being an independent HR consultant. There at that organization, I would say I was viewed as a partner sometimes.
Sometimes, okay.
Meaning it would depend on the situation or whether or not that leader was willing to be open to how I was advising them.
Okay.
So I think it just depended on the situation.
Okay. Fabiola or Renee, without, creating any danger for yourself. Let's see what is in the chat room. Not all the time, Fabiola says. Well, and I'm glad to hear of at least some of the time, because I will tell you, over the years, I saw a lot of HR advisors who were not actually recognized by partners. And I felt like sometimes I was one of the more unique ones that really did treasure their expertise. But so you know what it's like, and you've seen this. I mean, I had some high potential, high expectation people. I had some problem children that needed coaching, and sometimes just direct feedback, but every person and situation was different. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to share with you some of the more, I'll call them systematic. You've all got your intuition, which I know you bring to the table all the time, but we're going to talk about some hints and tips on how you can use coaching amongst all of these wonderful and unique situations that you're dealing with. oops, hang on, I gotta get my, okay, because what you do is probably something like this cartoon. And it's not, it's more like this. It's in every situation, an executive has to decide whether to lead by consensus, charisma, or cattle prod. Trust me, it's not always this easy. So, but before we go very far, I think we need to get a common understanding of what is coaching. Now, the International Coach Federation, ICF, says that coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. All very eloquent. And what it basically means is the coach and the client are in fact partners. The coach takes them through a process. The client is responsible for the results. But often we see these confusing points. It's not training. Training is when someone's teaching you something. Consulting is when they come in and they look at your situation and then they tell you what to do. Therapy is healing, and mentoring is someone taking their own guidance or taking their own experience and offering guidance. Coaching is none of those. It's much more about the partnering, and it's a lot about the process and the questions than it is about the answers. The coach doesn't have the answers. So why do we coach employees? Well, it's back to that, you know, it would be a lot easier to just tell people what to do on the days that you don't have time. But we all know we want to feel valued, respected, and trusted. Coaching gives us that feeling. It actually enhances trust in the leader. And coaching helps the employees, helps us all create their own sense of ownership and accountability for issues. It's a great skill developer, and it encourages people to come up with their own answers to their own problems. So it's definitely more time effective to tell someone to do, but in the long run, coaching for the right circumstances is going to yield you better results. So what we're going to do today, we're going to identify 3 ways you can support your leaders with coaching. I'm going to give you some tools, and we're going to get an opportunity. It won't be a direct coaching practice, but a combination of a demo and some dialogue for you to participate in. So we're going to talk about 1, you can coach the leader. 2, support the leaders by coaching their employees. And then sometimes you have to be the one to figure out what is best needed. When do you need internal resources versus when do you need external coaching resources? So I am concerned that I cut that other person off and lost them. I hope when I hit admit. So I don't know what happened to them, Zach.
Yeah, maybe.
So let's talk about coaching leader. When do you advise and when do you coach? So advising is telling people what to do. Coaching is much more about asking questions. And that can be really hard for leaders because they're used to having the answers. And I will tell you, when I first became a coach, and still to this day, I have people that say, well, you were in this kind of a position. What would you do? And it's so tempting to just say, well, here's what I would do. But as a coach, that's not what we do. And I will also tell you, there have been many times in the back of my head, I was thinking, oh my gosh, they just need to do X, Y, and Z. But when I follow the coaching process, people will come up with their own answer and their own way forward, and it'll be something that I didn't even cross my mind. So that's coaching. So I want to give you a couple of examples. So what about when someone comes to you and they want to know what the HR policy is? Do you advise or do you coach? Somebody want to answer that? And since there's so few of you, if you're willing to, you can just take yourselves off mute unless you've got like a, backhoe going on in your behind you or something. And that way, if you just want to chime in and give a quick answer, we can do that. But
Susan,
yes,
I said advise.
Advise, yes. What about when they're upset about what the HR policy is?
Coach.
Coach, yeah. Oh, cattle prod. I got it. I'm looking at the chat room as well. What about when the HR policy is limiting what they want to do? Because you've probably all heard that. Well, I just want to do such and such, but you won't let me. And that could be a mix, because here's the telltale way of when you advise versus when you coach. Anything that is technical or just giving information, that's when you're just advising, telling them. But anything that has emotions or values associated with it, some coaching is what's needed, at least in part. Okay. Why am I not going forward here? There we go. So let's talk about what is the best approach for the situation. When you've got someone that you're doing a development talk with, I think the best way to approach is you affirm all of the things that they're coming in and talking to you. Yes, I understand that this is, you're doing well, this is what and then coach. Coaching is when you drop into question mode. Tell me what your aspirations are. What are your goals? What are your strengths? How long do you expect that you'll be able to stay in this job before you move on? Or that's when you're coaching, lots of questions. Now, sometimes when you get people who are just a little bit unrealistic, well, you're probably not going to be president of the company in 3 years. You're going to have to give them a balance with realism. It's like, okay, well, I hear that's your goal, but how many people have you seen achieve this? What kind of skills do you think would be needed to reach that job? Do you think it's realistic? And then you drop back into coaching mode. And at the end, you want to end up with a mutual plan forward that helps them take ownership. Now, occasionally there's a tough message. And I think it's always good to start with coach. So you get coaching. So you get a common understanding of what's going on. Tell me how this is going, asking questions. And then at some point, you just have to give them the feedback. Here's the tough message. I had, well, actually, I think I'll save that story for later if we have time. But start with coaching, move into the tough message, and then you can go back into coaching. Okay, now that you've heard this feedback, how might we take this forward? What do you think you could do differently? And whatever it is, you want to conclude with clarity so they don't walk out of there thinking that you've just patted them on the back instead of giving them some clear feedback. Problem solving. Most people like to solve problems. And it makes them feel good. And the other, if you coach people to help them solve their own problems, it actually makes them less reliant on you or their leader. And you can coach your leaders how to coach their people. And it also sends a message about what expectations are, about when you expect them to go off and solve things on their own, because they become more confident. The only key with problem solving is you have to make sure that you're making them go solve a problem that really is within their ability to solve. And then we always have the crisis. Well, we don't always have the crisis, but when we have a crisis, I make the analogy to being in battle. The generals don't get everybody together and say, gee, how do you think we should attack this enemy that's firing at us right now? When it's time to charge the hill, the leader just has to jump in and say charge. And it actually gives people a sense of safety. And because that's what leaders do, is they know which is the right approach for the situation. So crisis is definitely just giving instructions, but the others, coaching. All right. Moving right along. coaching employees directly. So this could be a situation where you are coaching someone else's direct reports or people in someone else's team. And the tricky part there, and you've probably experienced it, is you don't want to usurp the authority of the manager. You don't want to conflict with the manager, but you can use coaching by asking questions to help these people when they show up wanting to talk to you, help them create a sense of ownership of the issue. I imagine, because I've heard this from other HR advisors, you get people that come to you and you're like, I have this problem and I want you as my HR advisor to solve it. And it's like, eh. So coaching can actually help them come to a common understanding of what they can do and what the problem might be. You can help them think of ways forward, mutually agreeable solutions. Sometimes you are a mediator and you're trying to just mitigate the conflict. And the trick in this is to be involved, but not interfering. Okay. Okay. So getting to some coaching tips you can use. In a minute, we're going to do a little demonstration and dialogue. But I'd like to, these are tips you can use whenever you are coaching someone, because one of the most important things in coaching someone is to create a safe space for a client, a coaching client, to make progress. They have to be able to hold the mirror up in front of themselves. They have to do some deep reflection. They have to make themselves a little bit vulnerable. And to do that, you know, coaches, you as coaches, it's important that you create a very safe and trusted space for them. And when you're listening to whoever you're coaching, you're not just listening for the facts and the data, you're listening for the emotion, their concerns, their values, their frustrations. And you want to acknowledge what you're hearing. You can acknowledge without agreeing. So what I'm hearing you say is, and always ask open-ended questions. And here's my little tip on that. Avoid using why. Now ask, tell me about how is this happening? What do you think the impact is? Lots of what questions are good. But when you start using why has a judgmental tone to it. You know, why, I always say, it's kind of like saying, why the heck? You know, it has an implication that maybe they should have done something differently. So I always say avoid why. And here are just some examples you can use. Like, okay, well, what if it's a conflict with another person? Well, what do you think might be driving that person's behavior? What you're trying to do is ask questions that help them gain perspective, particularly someone else's perspective as well. What are some ways you could respond to the situation? So you want them to think about the impact what they're doing has, or what they could be doing, what impact that could have. What would you like to see or do differently? When people can visualize an outcome, they're far more likely to make it happen, and it helps them gain clarity. What are some actions that you could take? And that's all about accountability. Okay, I've listened to you. We've talked about this situation for the last 20 minutes. Now, what are you going to do about it? Don't say it quite like that, but what are some actions you can take? Those are some good coaching kinds of questions. And what I always think is worth remembering is information comes from telling, but insight comes from coaching. Now we're going to do a little demo. How are we doing on time? All right, we're good. Here's what we're going to do. And to the extent you can, Renee, I think you're in the office now. I would appreciate it if you could go off mute, because for this to be the most useful for you, it will require you to, not require, but I invite you to participate in the conversation. So what we're going to do and is we've got two scenarios here. And since we're not in a group where you can go off and coach on your own easily, Zach and I are going to do a demo but we are going to do this demo in such a way that we stop every now and then and we invite your input. And we might ask you what you would do next, or what do you think is working, or what you think the impact is. So this is going to be pretty free flowing. Are you up for it?
Sure.
Yes.
All right. Okay, so let me just read this scenario. We're going to do the coach the leader scenario. So you as an HR person, I'm going to be the HR person here. I've received multiple complaints from early career staff about their manager. The manager isn't sensitive to their need for life balance. That's the complaint they're getting. And sends emails at all times of the nights and days expecting immediate response. And this manager, this was Zach, and Zach assumes that his employees should work the way he always has. And I have now scheduled some time to talk to Zach about this. And my objective is for Zach to understand how his behavior is impacting the team and coming to some sort of resolution on what Zach can do to handle the situation. Okay? All right, so here we go. Zach and I are going to go into role play, and then we will step out every now and then and ask you questions. Okay. Well, Zach, thanks for coming to visit with me today. Just wanted to check in with you on a few things, but why don't tell me how are things going for you right now?
Yeah, things are going well. It's pretty busy. I'm a little overwhelmed, if I'm being honest. It's the fourth quarter. Things are, really heating up. So trying to just stay on top of everything and meet our goals. So just curious, why I'm here.
Okay, well, yeah, I understand that you're curious, and I do. I've been hearing some things from your team that I'd like to share with you, but which I will do here in a second. But you said something about you're feeling pretty overwhelmed. I just want to make sure that we've got you in a comfortable space and that you're doing okay. You said you're overwhelmed about year end.
Yeah, it's just, this time of year, it's always about hitting the numbers, and there's really I'm getting a lot of pressure from my boss, and even my boss's boss is getting pressure just to meet the numbers and to finish the year strong. So it's honestly kind of weighing on me, and sending me in a little bit of a tailspin.
Yeah, wow. Tailspin, that's it's got to be pretty stressful. And I don't want to keep you in wondering why I called you to have this conversation, but I think it's related to some of the things you're saying. I've been hearing from some of your team members that they're feeling some of the stress in that you are asking for this is what they're saying, that you're asking for immediate and quick responses to things, and they feel like they're supposed to be on board on the job 24/7. And I'm hearing you say that you're really feeling the pressure and the stress, and even you use the word tailspin. How might that be impacting your team?
I don't know. I haven't heard this feedback from them before, but maybe it is impacting them in ways that I don't know.
Yeah. And as an HR advisor, sometimes people, when they're frustrated or something's not going right, they will come and they will talk to me. And that's not a secret. My job is to help them and help you kind of find some common resolution, because you are their manager, and I certainly acknowledge and respect that, and I want you to be the one in charge. But also part of my job is just to kind of let you know when I'm hearing these things. But so do you think it's possible that this sense of stress you're feeling could be impacting them in how you're communicating?
I think the thing about this team is there's really a lack of urgency. I trust my team. I know they've proven results before, but there just seems to be like I'm the only one feeling the pressure, and there's a lack of urgency from the team to finish strong.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to take a little time now. just a little break, and then we'll come back into demo mode. But any observations so far of what's going on in this conversation?
I liked that you honed in on the word. I think he said he's overwhelmed or something of that nature, to kind of you acknowledged that he was stressed out, you validated it. I think one thing that I would do, I would have asked him, I would have given him a scaling question, maybe like on a scale of 1 to 10, how stressed were you? And then ask him, well, if he said like a 8, what does an 8 mean? So you can
Yeah.
really hone in on it.
Yeah, that's great ideas. Okay. And like, go ahead, Teresa.
I would have, when he mentioned there's a lack of urgency, I would have asked him, probably a lot more probing questions. He mentioned they performed in the past and there seems to be a lack of urgency. I would have just asked him questions to think through that. Why does he suspect that there's a lack of urgency when they've delivered in the past? What does he think has changed to kind of drive what he thinks, he's seeing right now? I probably would have started there just to get more from him on his kind of line of thinking, to understand what he might be seeing from the employees, so that I could address it, as we talked a little bit more.
There you go. And that was the what would you do next? So let's go back to demo mode and let's use some of Teresa's questions as we continue. Because I think urgency was one of the last words he used. So Zach, you talked about you feel like they don't have a sense of urgency. Tell me more about that.
Well, it's these numbers and the stress that I'm getting from leadership, it has me with a sense of urgency, but I don't think the same sense of urgency is being reflected in the team. It's like sometimes I just feel like I don't know what's going on. I know something is happening, but I'm just unclear of what they're doing. So I follow up with them. I feel like they should be communicating with me in a way that I can tangibly see the train moving towards the finish line. And if I'm getting emails from my boss, with asking status updates and I'm not able to give that, then I feel like I'm justified in following up with my team on where we stand.
Okay, so you feel like they're not following up with you enough. They're not feeling this.
Yeah, maybe, as you ask me that, maybe it's more of like a lack of transparency
On what they're doing with you, or you with them?
Yeah, on what they're doing. And that's why I feel like I always have to follow up with them, because they're not letting me know where we stand.
Okay, now we're gonna stop again and say, okay, coaches on the line, what would you do next?
I like that he was thinking through that a little bit and saying, maybe actually when I think through it, it's more lack of transparency. Where I would have gone next is, perhaps he needs to, I would ask him, are there, checkpoints, or are there, ways where he could create more transparency with his team? And if so, what does he think he needs to do to create that transparency? Because maybe in uncovering that, then he discovers what's really going on. Maybe there are other stressors or other things that the team is experiencing that has led to this lack of urgency, which sounds different from what he's experienced in the past.
Okay, let's try that. Well, Teresa, ask your question. I had it in my mind. I just slipped it. What was the next thing you would ask?
So I would have asked him, what does he think he needs to do to build in maybe some checkpoints or a way to uncover what's driving, or to give him the opportunity to get a lot more transparency from the team so that
Okay.
he can then discover what's really going on, if there are other things going on with the team that's driving the lack of urgency.
All right, let's do that. Let's say, so Zach, you'd like to see more transparency. Are there some things that you could do that would create more transparency? Or let your team know what you're expecting from them?
Well, Susan, I'm curious. So you have heard the feedback firsthand from the team. Like, what would you do?
Well, it would be really tempting for me to come up with my own plan of action, but I'm not sure that, I mean, you're their manager. They want to hear from you. What would be most natural for you to do?
I don't know.
Well, let's just do some brainstorming. What might be just some random things you could. So if your goal is to create more transparency, you say you're not getting enough information. They must be feeling something. We don't know what it is. Just throw out some ideas, maybe just some random things you could do. And I'll throw one in every now and then.
Okay, yeah, I can go with that. So, it would be good to even have like some sort of end of day status email or something where I know, okay, team, we did this today. And then some sort of like end of week, like Friday status email of like, okay, we accomplished this today. I think that would maybe be one idea.
Okay, an end of day and or end of week. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, what else?
Mm, I have my team leads who are close to the day to day, but also have sometimes the brain space to manage up more than the working team.
Mhm.
There's maybe something I could do around growing them in a way where they are communicating more and maybe managing up more.
Okay. So, and those are some things, some clarifying expectations or what requests you can make of your team that will create more transparency. When they're saying they feel like you're wanting them to be immediately responsive, is that an accurate perception or
No, it's not.
no?
And as I think about this, I'm thinking maybe there's also some work that I need to do with my manager, because this is kind of sending us into like a spiral.
Yeah.
You're right, it's not realistic.
Yeah, and I wonder if they know what your expectations are. Have you communicated those with them recently?
Not recently. At the beginning of the year, we kicked it off halfway point. So last time was about June.
Okay,
I expect they should know that. Like they should live the expectations. That is my expectation.
yeah, and that sounds like something that you take very personally when an expectation's laid out. You've got it. You're, not everybody's going to be like you, Zach. I mean, people have short memories, and we all get stressed out. So, is it possible they need something more frequently?
Mm, How often would you recommend?
Well, how could you, here's a suggestion. How could you find out from them what they need?
Mm. Hmm. Maybe during my bi-weekly one-on-ones, like my check-ins, I can just ask what they need. It's fun. I never really thought about that. I'm always thinking about how we meet the goal.
Mhm. Yeah,
Think about that.
Okay. And I'm going to kind of artificially end it here just in the interest of time. So we were getting close to some actions, close, and starting to uncover things and some specifics. But again, we've got a few more things we want to cover. So we didn't get there. But any comments or observations about the coaching process, what you thought would work or what was working, what maybe wasn't working?
Well, I think, asking him the open-ended questions, and he started to kind of process and work through, with the brainstorming, you didn't come out and give him the answer. You kind of, turned it around and asked him. And then he took on that ownership of it and started to work through it and just start to throw things out there and come up with a couple of ideas as far as transparency, as far as the checkpoints that he wanted to put in place. And also he realized, like, okay, this is my level of sense of urgency, but it may not be the same as his team's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we're starting to come around. And quite honestly, even though this is a, somewhat contrived circumstance, Zach kept changing things up enough on me. It's not too far from the way things could play out. And I will tell you, even as an experienced coach, when someone says, well, what would you do? I just want to tell them, but you can't.
Mhm.
You can't. It's not. And at the end of the day, it will be better if he comes up with his own. So, all right. Well, I want to keep us moving here. We got just a few more minutes. So, one of the things that you as HR advisors can help in your organization is to figure out when the coaching should be done by the manager, when the coaching should be done by you. Maybe you have internal coaches, and when those aren't working. So here are some tips to consider when you need to get someone other than, farther and farther away in the concentric circles from the problem. It's like need to create a safe space. Really, really important. Leaders have a lot of skills that they're not always going to be in the best position to help develop their people on. And anything that requires an individual to be very vulnerable is going to be uncomfortable if they're talking to their manager. So that's a time when someplace farther removed from the manager, a coach would be useful. Need for objectivity, outside of the pre-existing notions. Again, it's easier to trust an external person. I have found that internal coaching is good for very specific kinds of things. If you are working on something that is more developmental and behavioral that evolves over time, it needs regular attention and it will take a longer period of time. An external coach of some sort would be helpful. And sometimes they're just like, I don't know what else to do. Internal is not enough. Coaching can send a message that you are making an investment in an individual's potential and in their development. And something that I like for people to keep in mind, especially as I have coached a number of early career folks, coaching is not just for executives. There is early career coaching as a retention and development tool, and it doesn't have to be nearly as costly. So there are some times when external coaching might be beneficial. And here are the things that coaching can help with: overcoming obstacles, self-awareness, making them a better leader or manager, unbiased feedback, team effectiveness. Sometimes it's things like prioritize and balancing things, relationships, getting to that next level, increasing their capacity to influence. I have done a lot of coaching with people that just get frustrated about office politics. They hate it, but guess what? Office politics is really about how do you influence others. And the job of a coach is also to be an accountability partner. So coaching, whether it's an internal or external coach, if it's well done, can be a system of accountability. So comments, how might you use what you've heard today in your role or in support of your clients? You can either put something in the chat room, or since we have just such a small group, you can chime in.
I can see this being beneficial in most situations, you know, especially now that I would potentially be external. You know, I can definitely see, especially like you said, creating that safe space. You're not part of the organization, so you can remain neutral, right? And give or coach your client through whatever the scenario is. So I definitely can see this being very valuable in, you know, most client situations.
Okay. Fabiola or Renee, any
Yeah.
comments?
Actually, this is kind of what I do and have the same scenario. I've had the same scenario. Yeah, definitely helpful. A lot from what I understand with the coaching, especially the leaders, is getting them to kind of understand who they are and what their leadership is about. So we have working managers. So sometimes they get a little bit lost, in the weeds where, it's hard for them to kind of pull themselves back and to be able to look at their own behavior.
Yeah, yeah. And as a coach, there are certain assessments we use that can help that, particularly the one of emotional intelligence assessments for leaders, but also just some basic questions about taking a circumstance like, okay, you're doing such and such. How do you think that's being received by your team? How might that be motivating them? How might, if you were on the receiving end of, X message, how would you respond to it? So a lot of those kind of impact questions can be helpful.
And also, I think, Susan, that this is very helpful because when you're coaching, you can kind of make them aware of their potential.
Yeah.
Sometimes they feel that they can't handle situations, but if you guide them and coach them, and that helps develop their self confidence and just develop the confidence on themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I said this specifically, but one of the things a coach does is provides encouragement and support. And, you give them the process, but as you say, as they work through it and they come to their own realization, they're going to feel more empowered themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And don't we all, if we're trying something new, don't we really like to know that we've got someone kind of standing next to us, walking the journey with us?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I also like what Renee said about working managers and being, lost in the weeds. I think that's very true. And then helping them see maybe where their team is not receiving their message. They, a lot of times they think they're communicating something. In their mind, they communicated this, but of course, when it lands with the team, it's maybe perceived differently or received differently. I think that's especially true in an environment where you have highly technical folks. It takes even more time sometimes to get them to focus on the EQ side of things. So I like what Renee said there, and remembering that they are working managers and they're in the weeds, right? And their focus is just getting the job done.
Yep.
And probably don't understand all the fussiness that comes with that sometimes from the team, right?
Yeah, and especially if they were a technical person who's just been increasingly
Right.
Promoted because they're a good technical person. Those are hard transitions to make for some people. So
Right.
Yep. The hardest, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a
Yes.
different mindset.
It is. And I've worked with engineers for a long time. And so it takes a lot of support and care for them to be able to kind of see the other side sometimes. So
Yeah, really understanding the soft skill.
Right.
Because, you know, my SVP of ops, he's always like, we got to get the job done. We got to get the job done. But I'm like, but if you're losing your people,
You're not going to get the job
you
done.
know,
Yeah.
it's not,
Yeah.
it's a balance there.
And that's I mean, you're absolutely right. For some people who've always worked in the technical side, understanding that the soft skills aren't just like foo-foo skills, they're actually an important part of how those tech people take those technical skills and get the job done. So, yeah. So. We want to make sure that you know about something that the ICF does, and that is we provide at request to organizations what we call coaches' corners. That is where we will come to your event, might be an employee resource group meeting, might be a professional organization, might be a conference. And volunteer coaches will provide pro bono coaching, might be over a course of a lunchtime or an hour or an evening or whatever. And so they get a chance to experience coaching, they get value from it. It's always a very popular thing for your organization to offer up. And in return, we don't charge anything for it. All we ask is that we be given the opportunity to, through a little presentation or some visibility to help people understand what coaching is. They both get to experience, but we'd like to be able to tell them what coaching is and who the ICF is. So if you have any interest or foresee, there's certainly, you can find us and we'd be happy to arrange a coach's corner for your organization. And here are some ways to get in touch with us. Any general, if you send emails to that administrator inbox, it will all get to the right person, Zach, me, our president, our community activities person, whoever. And if you just generally want to know about what's going on, here is our local website for events and coaches. And then, of course, to learn more about ICF globally, standards and coaching in general, that's the global. And I know that Zach is not going to leave without telling you about the special offer.
Yes, so I will drop the offer right here in the chat. But we would love to have you all. So if you join us in our membership today using the code that I dropped into the chat, you're able to get 20% off of your annual membership with the ICF Houston chapter. So take a look there. Go ahead and sign up if you would like to. If you have any questions, you can send, I'll drop my email directly if you have questions, or if you're also interested in maybe the Coach's Corner, I'll drop my email here. That way you can just email me directly. But we're excited that you were able to join us, and it would be a pleasure to have you.
Yeah. And why should you join or be interested in joining? It's great networking for people that are experiencing kind of the same things that you have in your community. We also have other events that we share with American Talent ATD. We have training. Some of our things will qualify as continuing education. So, and we're just a bunch of nice, really fun people. All right.
Right.
Well, it is 1 o'clock straight. I thank you for coming. We were supposed to have a larger group, but I don't know what happened to them, but I'm really glad and appreciate very much that Fabiola, Teresa, and Renee, that you were here with us today.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed
Yes.
the session.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a good
Bye-bye.
day. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.